All right, welcome everyone. We are now live here on the Headway YouTube channel. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll be talking about building successful development teams with John and Tim from Headway. So Tim is a development lead at Headway and helps kind of lead our development teams alongside with John, who is our CTO and one of the partners here at Headway. So before we kind of jump into the presentation, I just want to share a few things. Again, we host live streams like this every month to help developers, designers, startups, founders create better digital products together. So we'll talk about learning about new tools, better workflows, and discuss how we can grow together with new ideas, frameworks, and concepts. And just a little bit about Headway. Headway's a digital product studio in Green Bay, Wisconsin. We have a remote team all across the United States, and we help startups and corporate innovation teams validate ideas, discover business opportunities, and we also help them bring those new digital products to market through business and product strategy, design, and software development. So on that, before we jump into the presentation, I just want to remind everybody that this presentation will be recorded and uploaded to the YouTube channel here. And if you have a question today, submit it in the chat and we'll do our best to answer that for you along the way. And if you have any questions after today, you can leave a comment on the recording or you can send us an email at ahoy@headway.io and we'll do our best to get back to you within a day or two. But yeah, so thanks everyone for being here. And on that note, I'll hand it over to Tim and John and they can start the presentation.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. We'll do some additional intro information here so you know who's talking to you here about building the successful development teams. So like Jacob said, I'm John Kinney, one of the partners at Headway and the CTO. I help lead up our development team and work across a lot of our different client projects to help make sure we've got the right tools, technology, process, and people in place to ensure a really successful project across a various number of different client engagements that we have, from small single solopreneurs all the way through corporate innovation at enterprise scale. Tim, you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, thanks, John, and welcome everybody. So yeah, as a development lead with Headway, similar to John, I get the pleasure of working with a variety of our clients and supporting a variety of our development teams across those client projects. We enjoy working with a few different languages and frameworks, from Rails to Elixir to React to mobile development, and being able to support those teams through our process and through our product development is a delight. So glad to be here with you all and have the opportunity to share our experience with you.
Yeah, so Tim and I have been chatting for a couple of weeks leading up to this presentation, really getting down on paper all of the different ideas and systems and processes that we use at Headway to help build successful development teams. And we thought it'd be great to just get all of that out in the open, help share it with you. And, you know, Tim and I attend quite a few different leadership events, conference talks, things like that. And we're not going to be able to give you the exact rubric of what you're going to need to build your unique development team to meet the 100% criteria of your small company or large organization. But we hope that through one of the tools that we share or one of the ideas that we have, we'll create some sort of insight, a small nugget or a takeaway that you can say, you know what, that hour-long presentation, the 20% is probably going to be 80% useful for you. So kind of invert that Pareto principle for you. So hopefully one or two nuggets will really help be that thing that unlocks you in your journey to build a successful development team and take something to the next level, whether that's just awareness of a tool or a process or just a way of thinking about growing your team. So with that, we'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover today and who should be here. So this is going to be for development managers, CTOs, project managers, or if you're on a development team and you're looking to lead up and try and help instill some additional support, some organization, some structure, some ideas. If you're yearning for a way to help be heard on your development team and you're a developer, maybe we'll give you a couple ideas that you can take to your manager. We want to help you learn a couple of different things. Here are 4 that we'll outline specifically, but there's a lot of different nuggets as we go through this content. So some of the things that we talked about in promoting this event, we definitely wanted to make sure to cover, and like I said, there'll be additionals, but we talked about how to screen for and hire talented developers on an upward trajectory. So if you're looking to get junior or early career developers onto your development team, we want to try and help give you some ideas for how to spot those folks in the market. How to kick off projects and help teams integrate everyone's unique styles. And so we've all heard that diverse teams build better products. We want to be able to celebrate one another's diversity, not just of ethnicity or skin color or anything like that, but just also mind share and like approach and understanding and shared life experiences. All of those different kinds of diversity are super important. And we've got some tools and processes that can help you lean into that with your team to understand how to best meet everybody where they're at to get the best from your team. Also, we want to figure out how to get meaningful feedback from your team. So we all falter, we all have missteps. Headway's no exception there. Tim and I have had our share of positive feedback from the team and things that we're doing, and ways that we could have done stuff better. And similarly, we have feedback for our team members as well along their journey. And so this is a two-way street of getting and giving meaningful feedback to your team. We've got some ideas and some tools to help you with that. And in order to make sure you're working in a project and know where you're heading, we want to help you define the project success criteria and get buy-in from your team so that they feel empowered to do their best work by understanding that shared vision and where the goal line is. So why is this topic important? Well, underperforming teams, if you don't build a good one, right, you can waste time, it can cost you money, can create mental overhead, stress, it doesn't foster loyalty, doesn't encourage accountability, and can lead to a culture of blame. And conversely, great teams lead to happiness at work, personal accountability, growth at all levels of the organization, and increased profitability. All right, building a dev team to complement your organization. We're going to go through a little bit of a journey here. Tim and I have some prepared content. We're just going to kind of talk it through with one another, maybe pose some questions to each other as we explore this content together and share some of our notes with you. So one of the things we wanted to do was kind of go on a journey together in terms of some of this content. And so building a team to complement your org is where we're going to start. We'll talk about the structure of organizations and teams and how that can manifest itself sometimes, both positively and negatively. Then again, we'll talk about screening for and hiring talented developers, how to kick off projects, defining that success criteria, having a clear roadmap, the handoff, building a shared culture of trust and growth, demonstrating humility, and getting feedback from your team. So it's kind of the life cycle of a product almost as you're building things out, hiring for your team, launching it into the market, and all the steps in between. So to start it off, we wanted to talk about building a dev team to complement your specific organization. And sometimes you just have to understand where your organization is at and either very intentionally pick your battles and fight to get something worked out that's going to work well for you in the context of your organization, or just understand what your organization structure is and how things are set up so you know how to be most successful in that existing system. And so there's this concept called Conway's Law, and it says any organization that designs a system, defined more broadly as just an information system, will inevitably produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. So to break that down, what does that mean? Well, there's different kinds of organizations that you might need to build a dev team for. The bootstrapped startup, there's maybe a consultancy like Headway. There's a well-funded, high growth startup, perhaps with some VC capital. Maybe a late stage established former startup, something like Basecamp's, 37 Signals of Rails fame, or an established enterprise organization. And so Conway's Law talks about the fact that the dev team structure in any one of these organizations will mirror the communication structure. So if you think about that, if you're a bootstrapped startup, what do you have, 2, 3 employees, maybe 1 or 2 developers? It's going to be pretty bare metal. You're going to be working probably just in time. Feedback from the customer is going to be immediate, and you and maybe one of your other developers are going to just be sitting next to each other or on Zoom, working through things in real time. And so that can lead to a perhaps very fast to iterate monolithic application because everybody knows everything because there's so few people. On the flip side of that, in an enterprise organization, you might have, the accounts payable, the technology accounts payable team, right? You might have the messaging team. You might have the, WYSIWYG, the what you see is what you get editor team, and all these different teams build their small component and create contracts in between the systems that they're developing so that people on other teams can integrate with one another. But it can lead to some inefficiencies. So if you're in a situation and you're trying to build a development team, you either, like I said, need to understand where your organization's at to best optimize for the folks that will thrive within those different buckets, or very intentionally carve out maybe like an innovation team inside of a corporate setting where you can have that smaller structure if that's what you're going for. There's this saying from John Maxwell that says, if someone can do something 80% as well as you, let them do it now. And so we've had some pretty good success at Headway hiring folks on an upward trajectory. And we have a couple of tips and things that we've seen that have helped us throughout that journey. And so I'll give the first one, and then Tim, you can jump in and talk about some of the things you've seen as well. But I think we all understand that it's quote unquote easier to just hire senior developers or people who have 3 years of experience or so. Maybe they know the programming language that you primarily use at your company. They can come in, plug in, learn a few small things about how you do that tech, and just hit the ground running. But in reality, they're very hard to find. They're often quite good at what they do and likely happy at their current job. Although with COVID, we've seen quite a few different people kind of questioning their career and making some changes and shifts. And one thing, we've seen that definitely at Headway too. And we were talking about it at our leadership meeting the other day. It's sort of like we've all been sitting, at home or perhaps in the office, doing the same thing, kind of being stuck in this routine for the last 18 months. And so even if you're happy at your job, you might just want a change of scenery because maybe you haven't been able to go on a vacation, or you haven't been able to hang out with your friends quite as much, or when you do, you have to take all these different precautions, and it's just all this mental overhead. And so again, those senior folks are harder to get, harder to retain, and there's just so much opportunity right now in the market that we think it makes a ton of sense to be able to grow talent inside of your organization. And so whether that's a true, like just fresh out of college or even fresh out of high school, someone who's been kind of a career switcher and new into their journey as a developer, you could take that person from scratch, so to speak, or you could take somebody quite early in their career, maybe with a year of experience, and really spot how they're going to be able to make an impact in your organization. One of the things that I've seen specifically in a couple interviews with folks that have worked out quite successfully at Headway is that people aren't afraid to be in over their head. And this can be something that either is innate and in them already, or something that they've learned in their first career. So for example, we have a person on the development team who worked at a large sort of startup, I would say, I guess, kind of post-startup company in the car rental space. And they had this concept of needing to just take whatever ticket was next in the backlog that was quite well groomed. They had a whole good system of project management and product folks. And it didn't matter if you didn't understand what the feature was. It didn't matter if it was in a technology you didn't know yet. If you were on the team working through those tickets, you had to take that one off of the board and gain the knowledge and gain the understanding in order to be successful delivering that particular feature. Whether it was, again, something about the product you didn't know or even just the technology. And so this person came from that environment, and boy, if they haven't just been able to come in and not be afraid to be in over their head and just sort of have an understanding that you're not going to know everything, right? At Headway, our clients don't hire us because we know all of the answers. They hire us to work with them to get to the answers and to be smart and confident and competent enough to know that we don't know everything and figure out the right way to get there together. Tim, what have you seen in terms of being able to spot this person on an upward trajectory? Maybe something with the way that we administer our take-home tests?
Yeah, thanks, John. That was a great intro to this element of building a development team. It's so critical to find people that, one, are passionate about what they do. They have that drive to work through the uncertainty and the challenge that new product development brings. Finding the person with passion, finding that person with level of resourcefulness, that they know when to ask questions, when to call for help, when to work solo and simply press through the challenge that they're facing by being resourceful, using Google, using whatever is available to them online. There are answers out there to the problem you're trying to solve. And so, again, the person that's able to be resourceful is likely ready to be successful on your project. The part that we haven't gotten to too much yet is fittedness and culture in the communication element that is so critical to a person's success in a given project within a given team. And so being able to talk with somebody during a hiring process to understand what drives them, how do they like to work, is there a particular routine rhythm that they like to follow, that they've established, or that they've simply heard about because they're new to the industry and they don't really even have the experience to say, this is my preferred work style. I'm simply new to the industry. Are they teachable? Are they hungry? Are they asking for advice? That attitude of humility and eagerness to learn, that has shown for myself when I've taken that approach to work. I think, John, you would say the same. And people that have come to the team when they've approached the work with that teachability, with that humility, they've seen success and they've seen growth, and it's really set the stage not only for them personally but for their teammates and then for the client. So being able to ask questions during the hiring process that gives clarity as to what drives the person is so important. And that questions can come in the form of experiences. Tell me about a time where you fill in the blank. Tell me about what do you enjoy to do when you're not working. Help me understand what you enjoy. Tell me a story. How they approach those questions is insightful. Give them a chance then to ask you questions. Like, make sure that, as you said, John, it's a two-way street. And so they need to know what they're getting into as much as you need to know who they are and how they'll approach their work and their teammates. So give them a clear picture as much as possible by inviting them to ask questions of you and your team. And through that, you can often get to an idea of how well they would fit within your culture and how ready they are to be a productive team member.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned there is being able to ask questions in the interview process. And I think the communication style and the communication, I guess, intuition that people have, like when to know when to ask and when to know when to push through, as you touched on, is super important, especially in a consulting situation like we have at Headway. But again, to kind of throw back to this person on our team who doing this quite well, it was kind of funny because they didn't ask any questions when we gave the hiring or the take-home example, the take-home test. They just kind of said, oh, okay, thank you, great, and read through our Notion page that we give, submitted their response, and it was like, okay, great, we got this answer from this person. Let's take a look at how they did. And it was complete. It was quite well styled. We give a time box for these things around 4 hours so that we respect people's time, and then try and make sure that we generally can compare one person's output to another person's output and understand, okay, in this amount of time, this person made these decisions, they asked these questions, and they came to this outcome, so that we can understand what it would look like from day one. And I wouldn't say that it's a race to the bottom in terms of speed, right? It's not all just about how complete you were, but what did your Git commits look like? You know, what types of questions did you ask and when? And how many of these technologies were new to you? And what did you do in the situation where this was the first time you had ever written, for example, on our full stack React exercise? we ask folks to take 2 code sandboxes and create a backend GraphQL server and then a front end interface that can query it. And for this person, they were like, oh yeah, I'd never used Apollo server or set that up before. And it was very not apparent that that was the case when they submitted their example. So it was just really cool to see somebody jump in, take our documentation, our guidance, and the links that we give to allow people to explore and learn some of these technologies that are going to be vital to their growth at the company, and just jump in and dig in and say, oh, it's okay that I don't know this. I'm going to figure it out. I guess the only growth area perhaps there was you also don't want to hide the fact that you don't know something, right? Because we've had folks on the team who have, logged in their timesheets, and because we're a consultancy, we have to track our hours, and we get to the end of a quarter or something, and we're reviewing things. It's like, hey, you did great this quarter. We were hitting our deadlines, and everything was looking good from what had been communicated to us. But there was an instance where somebody didn't, wasn't quite 100% reporting their time correctly and had to work a little bit more than they said they were in order to achieve those same outcomes. And we definitely don't want that to be the case either, because as you're growing your team, you're going to need to support people wherever they're at. And even if they can get to the outcome, they're probably going to get burned out in the process. So you want to try and spot that kind of thing as well, and encourage folks to be 100% honest with where they're at. And we'll touch more on that last 10% of the truth in honesty later in the presentation. Anything else on this screening for upward trajectory, Tim?
No, I think that was a good overview on that. And I think that also that transitions us into the next point, which is how we kick off projects. So, John, do you want to give an overview of how we identify people's strengths and what drives them, and introduce some of those tools that we've found effective?
Sure. Yeah. So the first one that we have on the screen here is a system called DISC, and it's a personal assessment tool. And a lot of times people will take the Myers-Briggs or the Strengths Finders, and we do some of those as well. But we found DISC really helpful in determining our style of work, and sometimes our style of leadership, because we're all leaders in our own way. And what this does is it really breaks down how you're going to come into a situation and how you're going to respond to a situation, whether you're sort of initiating a piece of work or you're responding to it from a colleague. And it helps us understand how to be better for one another and work as a healthy team. And because, like probably many of you, we have lots of folks on the development team, about 16 here at Headway. Not everybody has had a chance to work with everyone else yet as they get assigned to a client project. And as I mentioned, one of my jobs is to try and help make sure that we're creating teams that are going to be successful for a given project. And so I need to take into account, okay, this person has this technical skill, maybe it's a mobile developer, and this person has this back-end API development skill. It's going to be a 2-person team with a designer and a product person. And so will this team of 4 be successful based on the tech that we need to do, the engagement with the client, the subject matter, and their background and history, and then also just their work style and their communication style. And anybody can work with anybody if you have enough information about the situation that you're in. And so what we do is we take our assessments from DISC, which is a part of our hiring process. And initially, when we were rolling this out, we did it at a team retreat, which again, we'll speak a little bit more about some of those activities and things you can do later. But we got everybody up to speed on DISC at the company and just compared and contrasted with one another and said, oh man, in this situation, Tim is going to want to really help support me, and I'm going to want to try and drive some of the initiatives. Like, we'd be a great team in order to bring this product to life. But if we had Tim wanting to support somebody else and that same person wanting to support Tim, there's going to be, even though they're both very, very well intentioned, there's going to be a little bit of a fight for who's going to lead and who's going to sort of take the first step. And we might be a little slower or timid. And so as long as we know that going in, we'll try and have a conversation up front and say, okay, Tim, you're going to be the development lead in this particular project. So lean towards some of your other tendencies, maybe not as much of the S, which can be sort of thought of as support in the DISC assessment. And that way we'll be able to be successful.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good, John. Thanks. It's also, there's an element of just simply team building that comes through exploring and understanding one another's strengths. Not only do we then get to exercise within the context of a team our best selves, right? We also feel like we get to know one another. There's a connection that happens simply in getting to have that discussion and in being able to foster one another's strengths again in the context of a team. So yeah, so that's a really strong way to start building a team. The other part that one of the other elements of this kicking off a project that Headway has really done well, that I've really loved about working with this team, is we've always emphasized there needs to be a healthy work-life balance, that people have priorities outside of product development, outside of building things, and we never want the product development to overrule what people have in life, and we want to be able to respect that and again sort of foster deepening your relationships outside of work. So kicking off a project, in order to maintain that work-life balance, we have to start there. We have to start with that understanding and that as a goal in some regards. And so some ways that we found to kick off a project, some tips that we've, I guess, embedded in our processes: make sure that there's boundaries being set. So if people are planning to work from 8 to 5, or they work a shortened day and maybe take an abbreviated lunch, or they need to flex time, that we respect that. If it shows they're offline, do our best to acknowledge that in a message that maybe needs to be sent, and just say, hey, you don't need to respond to this until tomorrow, but I just want to put it out there as a request, something that I'll need your assistance on. So having boundaries that may be small, they may be very specific as well, in terms of when PTO happens or the means of communication. But making those boundaries known, again, can lend itself to a healthy work-life balance. We're a distributed team. People are all over the states, and so time zones come into play. Being able to be just simply be aware of the fact that somebody is at the end of their day who's on the East Coast, or somebody's early eating breakfast. Like, just again, an awareness and establishing what those differences are with one another's schedules can help maintain work-life balance. And I know something, John, that you've leveraged really well is just how to communicate in Slack, and some different techniques, and using some of Slack's scheduling abilities. I wondered if you want to take a minute to describe how you've found that to contribute to work-life balance.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, is that so much of our communication right now is written and asynchronous in Slack. We do jump on Zoom quite a lot as a team when we need to either have a harder conversation or hash out something in the nitty-gritty of a project, or pair program or whatnot. But for a lot of the time, when you're doing asynchronous communication in Slack, and if you work on multiple projects like we do, it can be pretty overwhelming, and that can lead to a sense of, anxiety and stress as your day builds up, and you don't just have one inbox anymore, you've got 50. And so what we do for a technique to try and help eliminate some of the strain there is try and turn our main Slack channel into almost a table of contents. And so every new message that you have, or every new sort of concept that you want to discuss, is in the main channel, and then we do 2 right angle brackets to indicate this is going to be a thread, and then we will respond to ourselves in the thread to help both indicate that it's going to be a thread and that we will now take our conversation over there. That way, if you're, a project manager, or, me, for example, trying to oversee a couple of different projects from a high level and sync with the other dev leads on the team, I can still keep a pulse of what's happening on any different project by going into that Slack channels project and sort of reading through the day's table of contents of messages, so to speak. And it's usually like only 8 or 10 or maybe 12, but that fits on a screen, and you can get a sense to where do I need to dig into? What might the team need help or direction on? Or is somebody feeling stressed out? Or, is a client kind of, crossing a boundary or having issues? And you can assess that a little bit more effectively when you lean into, 95% of your messages being in threads. And I'm excited for the new Slack feature where you can open multiple channels at a time too, which we've been able to do in other platforms for quite some time. I think the other thing is just scheduling those messages. And so we used to use external tools for Slack that would integrate, and now they have it natively, which is really nice, where you can say, rather than, hey, please ignore this. I know I'm working at 9 o'clock. I had to flex some time and then got the kids to bed, so I'm catching up. I'm not just overworking. Like, you don't have to explain yourself in all that detail and ping people and bother them, even though you're telling them to ignore it. You can just do your work if you needed to flex some time at 9 o'clock. And schedule the message to arrive to their Slack the next morning at 8 a.m., for example. That way people will understand, you're not crying wolf all the time. And if you do ping them at 8:15 at night or something because production's down or a client had an issue with the statement of work or something, they'll probably pay a little bit closer attention to that and won't just say, oh, this is noise.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, John. Maybe just the last point about kicking off projects and how to ensure that a project can be successful for the duration, right? You don't always know how long a project will be. And so it could be a month, it could be a year. How do you establish health throughout that time? Accountability is a topic that comes up a lot. How do we hold one another accountable? And that accountability is a hard term. Nobody likes to, it's not our favorite topic to discuss, but teams are going to have moments of disagreement. There's going to be disagreements between the team as a whole and the client. How prepared is the team to have a difficult conversation, either with one another, maybe with their manager, with the client? Are they equipped to have those conversations in a way that's healthy, that maybe turns the accountability as a topic, as a term, from having a negative connotation to actually being something positive and something productive and necessary for everybody's success and well-being? And so, considering this team, have they been equipped? Do they seem ready? Do they have tools in order to have difficult conversations? Considering that up front can help ensure health throughout the duration of a project.
Yeah, and we've done quite a bit to try and lean into that concept of, rumbling well and rumbling with vulnerability and with honesty. And that's the concept from Brene Brown's teaching in her book and workshops called Dare to Lead. And so that's something that Zach, our head of people, brought to us and was able to do with us at a retreat a couple of times ago. And so that's really been helpful to sort of have that shared language around even just labeling it something like a rumble, like, hey, we just got done with retro and I didn't really love the way that ended, could we have a rumble real quick? I just want to talk through something. So you're mentally preparing yourself and the other person that, hey, this might be a hard conversation, but I'm willing to go there with you. And, you don't have to run and tell your manager and have them be the arbiter of the conversation. It empowers and encourages folks to be able to resolve differences on their own. And so that, as a part of kicking off the project, look at everybody's DISC profile, understand the way that they are going to respond to different aspects of the project, of stress, of work, of delivery, of pull request review, of pair programming, of Slack messages. I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. And if we were just flying blind, I mean, we'd have, I think, a lot more negative rumbles at Headway than trying to get everything out on the table and understand how to meet one another where we are.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, John.
All right, so let's keep rocking then here. So still in the context of kicking off project, there's a lot more to do as we talk about setting the stage. And for us, we get to kick off projects all the time. Maybe if you're in a corporation or if you're working at a startup, maybe there's smaller little projects within your larger product, but perhaps you're not kicking things off as much. So we've got quite a few reps on this. And so we've got some additional ideas that can really help with the streamlining of this project kickoff process. So understanding that there needs to be constraints and some sort of success criteria to get buy-in from your team is the only way that we can all sort of get rowing in the same direction, for example. So a lot of times for us at Headway, we're selling a duration of time, right? So we've got a weekly rate. We know if we need a team of 4 generally to be able to execute on this size of project, or maybe it's a team of 6 or 8. We'll understand the burn rate for that team for that duration of time. And if we feel like what we want to achieve is about a 2-month build or a 3-month build, we'll understand then our timeline and our budget. What then we have to understand is there's flexible scope. And so we set that stage with the client that in order for this project to be successful, you're not going to get every single feature that you request. But we will end on time and we will end on budget, because typically we'll give a max number. It's not that it's a not to exceed, it's just that with this size team, there's no more way to bill more unless they ask us to work 50-hour weeks or something, which we just don't do. But people are going to take PTO and whatnot. So oftentimes we can really say, we'll hit the project with this budget, and at the end of this 3 months, we will launch. But exactly the level of fidelity of the features and exactly what features make it into the product need to be flexible, because we don't 100% even know what the customers want yet. And so defining all of those success criteria up front is really important. And even if you feel like your organization doesn't have to play by those rules, like, oh, well, we're an enterprise company in the fintech space, we've got almost unlimited resources and we can hire as many people as we want, that's not going to lead to a successful project outcome. I mean, that's why IT budgets, spiral out of control and take years longer than they should have, because there are no constraints really helping rein in those conversations, and there's no success criteria. So we would suggest, even if you're in a situation like that, to write down a project plan and hold yourself to some of those constraints. What else do we have here, Tim, about defining the success criteria and getting buy-in?
Yeah, that was a great overview. Being able to empower one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's decisions that happen every day on any given client project. Some become almost routine, but there's still important decisions that are made. And as, like you mentioned before, as you identify somebody being ready, 80% ready to take on that task, big or small, empower them, like ask them if they would be interested in owning that particular task, and then provide your support should they need it along the way. That helps build trust. It helps people grow. It helps them advance in your organization. There's lots of good that can come from being able to give authority to one another within the context of a team.
Yeah, and it's helpful to do that as a part of the kickoff, right? To establish those roles and responsibilities, so that, for example, if you or I were in a kickoff and the client maybe had talked with us in the sales process and they were really comfortable with us, but then the team shows up, they might, if we do all the talking and we try and, really be the loudest voice in the room, they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, Tim's the guy or John's the guy, and that's how the project's going to go. Everything's going to flow through them and I'm feeling good. So it's our job to immediately set those expectations that, like, we'll actually know, Chris or Patrick or somebody on the team is going to be leading this up for you, and I'm here to help support them, but we're going to trust their decision and we're going to trust that they are going to help steer the conversation in the right way. Or if we're leading a project with one of our product strategists, that's even more important, because they're going to be defining almost the inner workings of your business with you, right? And so being able to help push those decisions down to the right people on the team and set that stage as a part of the kickoff will eliminate, for the most part, power struggle conversations, or, is this person allowed to do this? Or I thought somebody else had this responsibility. So very clearly establishing that. Zach, also on our team, I mentioned our head of people, always brings back a quote, clear is kind. And so even if it's a hard conversation or a rough hump to get over, being clear is always going to be better. Whoops. So speaking of clear, having a clear roadmap is another thing that we really need to do to be successful. And, Tim, I know you're really an advocate of this, about the pace of a sprint.
Yeah, I see so much of a desire from clients, and then within the context of a team, your teammates wanting to anticipate where we're going to be. Are we on time? Am I going to be able to get my product out the door at such and such a date, at such and such a budget? People are very eager to get it to market, not just the owner of that product, but the builders of the product. Excited for people to use it. You put a lot of time and passion into it, and so it's very exciting to see it finally get into the hands of customers. And so being able to predict when that might be is very important. That predictable timeline, predictable scope. We do our best at the beginning of a project to kick off with estimates and to anticipate capacity and needs of the project. But the pace is established over time. It's not something you can just call into existence. You have to be able to work together. You have to be intentional. You have to be diligent to establish a pace. And from that, then can come some predictions. You can anticipate when those major milestones will be. And when you get to that rhythm, when you establish that rhythm, that pace, I think everybody has a sense of, okay, like we're doing it. This product is gonna make it to market, and it's gonna be received by the customers, and here's what we're gonna expect to happen in return. And it's honestly, it's a win for everybody when there's a predictable pace that is established.
Yeah, and I know one thing you're a big advocate of as well is as that team matures throughout the first weeks and sprints in the process and that velocity starts to establish, I think it's a big reason or a big reason that can come to an understanding with any given team is that we really let the team estimate their own work. And you touched on it, but I think that's kind of the piece that helps that team establish that cadence. Whereas if someone else has to estimate it or we're just working off of a predefined list, it's always going to feel like a fight and the team's not going to have buy-in into the timeline. And so that's where, you know, we set our estimate and we try and hit it or exceed it. And when we do, we feel really great. And then that feeds upon itself and we get better at our estimates. And if we exceed them and we have to roll if our work exceeds our estimates and we have to roll some of those tasks over into the next sprint, and we need to take those learnings, explain and understand with the client that something changed or, you know, we were just a little bit off in our understanding, and take that into the next sprint to build some of that trust as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And one other element that can be overlooked as you get into a project and you're passionately building this new product, PTO can be neglected, and so it's so important for us as leads or us as individuals within the context of a team, remind one another, hey, you need time away, you've got time away, plan for that, and then in their planning and you encouraging them to take time away, that too will make for pace, rhythm, predictable cadence. A lot of good comes from that, and so make sure that you encourage one another to take time away.
Definitely. And then when we get to the end of the project, the handoff is really important as well. And I think it's imperative that we establish what the handoff will look like in the kickoff so that everybody understands what they're going to get at the end of the project. You know, are you going to be hosting it? Am I going to be hosting it? How is it going to be supported at the end of it? When we are done, are we launched and set it and forget it? Or, in all likelihood, am I going to need half the team to support it for 2 months and then, you know, half of that team to support it for the next 2 months until we get some more funding or we understand what the customers think of the existing release? And that way we can just establish not only how the existing feature work will cease, but how the project will really transition into its launch phase.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. One other element, John, when it comes to handoff, that there's this funny tension that happens between we're passionately building a product. We want to see this product go to market. We want to see it be successful. We don't think that we're going to ever not be working. Like some ways, you don't think that you're going to hand this off to somebody else to maintain because you've invested so much of your energy into it. However, it's going to happen. Somebody else is going to either join your team or your entire team is going to be handing it to another team. And that's just a life cycle of products. So being able to document along the way all the details needed so that that next person or that next team can be successful, it's critical. It's needed. And when that's neglected, it'll affect not only the current team, but obviously future future contributors.
Yeah, and one of the things that has actually happened to us, Tim, is you build a product for a year and it wasn't ready to launch yet, right? We run out of budget, so to speak. It actually could go to market, but there's trying to figure out who's going to own it. Do they appoint a CEO, that kind of thing. And so a product sits for a while, and then lo and behold, a deal gets done, and we're back in the fold to try and actually launch this thing with a different partner and some acquisitions and things. And now we have to pick up this code base after it's sitting on the shelf for a year. Did we document it well enough for ourselves, right? So it isn't even just always about the next team thinking that it's going to be a nice thing to do for somebody else. You very well could be documenting it for future you. And so be kind to yourself.
Yes, I love that phrase. It's so true.
So we've got a question here, whether or not we could comment on the process involved towards fair and forward missing performance. Sorry, it just disappeared on me. Comment on the process involved towards fair and forward missing performance assessments and evaluation. Yeah, we'll talk about that in one of the next sections. We'll cover a tool that we use to help with performance assessment, both generally across the year and specifically in every quarter. We review our performance with our team in a tool called Progression. And so we'll cover that in one of the future sections here. All right, so enough with kicking off the project. Now we're in it. We're building the product, and we're building a culture of trust and shared growth as we build our product. And so let's see here. We've got quite a few things to talk through in this culture of shared growth. It's one of the things that Headway is really passionate about. You might have guessed that based on how we talk about, DISC and some of the other assessments that we use, Strengths Finders and MCore, and some of these things that we do at retreats and try to get to know one another better and how to best work with one another. Those are some tools, but there's also some additional just strategies that you can use on a day-to-day basis. And so one of the things that's very practical in the context of development and sprint cadence is just reevaluating the stories and doing backlog grooming so that there's always work to do, and understanding that things are ready to be picked up and we don't have to, hey, what should I do next? What should I do next? Because when you can build a culture of trust and allow people to have work that's ready for them, and then get them up to speed with a product person and a designer to help tee up that work, we can estimate that work and then get it done and QA it. That's going to really start to spin a flywheel, and it's going to spin in a positive direction for you and your team members, building trust with one another, you and your product owner and your designer and the client. And so being able to execute successfully on well-defined work is definitely one way to build trust. What are some others here, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, John. That was great. There's really, building trust happens in every interaction, and so little things. John and I are coming up with a list, and that list kept growing as to ways to build trust. The one way that I've found effective, that I've not only received, it's built trust with me, but also that I've used in helping others, is in the middle of a sprint, if you're working on 2-week intervals, take time to reevaluate the current sprint commitments. So look at your stories, look at what you're planning to deliver, and encourage the team to say, hey, you know what, that looks like it's probably going to carry over. I don't think I'm going to get there for whatever reason, right? Just simply ask, do you see any of these tickets that are not going to make it? Well, proactively move them out of the sprint, move them onto the next sprint, move them into the backlog, deprioritize them, so you're not carrying around, you're not asking the team to carry around that overhead of, each day, am I going to get to that? Am I going to get to that? When you already know that you likely won't. And so encourage the team to take ownership by not only adding to their plate, but taking away things that they know they're not going to be able to get to. And so, yeah, that's one way that has helped me, and hopefully has helped others. Being able to celebrate accomplishments and milestones. So you're seeing anything from a pull request that gets merged, it's an accomplishment. Like, celebrate that, congratulate the person on work achieved. End of sprint, being able to share out what each team member has accomplished. Again, celebrate that, recognize it, say, hey, great work. This is exactly what we plan to do, and look at it. It's beautiful. It works. And then obviously looking at the end, the big milestones, shipment, recognizing within the team, and then bubbling up those wins and those celebrations to the broader organization is equally important, and that helps build trust. It helps create some sense of satisfaction, and encourages the person, your teammate, to slow down and celebrate as well, and not just move on to the next task.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good thing. We oftentimes will make sure we're addressing the squeaky wheel, but maybe not, help celebrate along with the team quite as much as we need to. And, people need that encouragement. And that's another one of the things we learn in DISC is, how do you best receive feedback or praise? And that's one of the things that we can lean into with people. Some folks don't like words of affirmation or public celebration. And so sometimes you have to get creative with thanking maybe the whole team instead of just a single person. But it's good to know to meet those folks where they're at as well. And then, so for one of the next bullet points here, and we'll go through some of these a little bit quicker because we've got some quite a bit of content yet to cover, but give you some maybe nuggets to take away and investigate on your own, or ponder whether they would be a good fit for your organization. One thing, so I host a podcast through Headway called Even Keeled, and we have an episode, I believe it's number 2, that talks about retrospectives. And it's a pretty in-depth look at the template that we use, the way that we approach our retros, how we're sort of recapping the sprint process and talking with one another on the team. And one of the things that, the person on the podcast and I discuss, Andrew, is that sometimes it's hard to have your manager in your retro because you feel a little bit constrained with what you can say or what you can do. And so we talked about that a year ago when that was recorded, and it seemed like a good idea, and we didn't quite implement it though, right? It was like, well, not everybody knows how to run the process yet. I'll just sit in and kind of be the scribe, and I'll pose some of the questions and help people understand the template. And especially as we have new hires and new projects that kick off, I felt like, well, I know it's maybe not a best practice, but I'm training. So I kind of gave myself that excuse. And recently, Tim and I have decided that we're just not going to do that anymore. The team will figure it out. The template's pretty self-descriptive. We'll prepare whoever is going to administer the retro so that they feel empowered to give that. And if it's perhaps not somebody from the team, but somebody from a different team, even better. And so stepping away from those retros as a leader has been really helpful. And then in order to maintain connected with the project and what the feedback from the team is, we record those retros, not in video or audio, but we type out our answers in a Notion doc, which is a lot like a Google Doc, if you've used that before, where everybody can be in it at the same time. And so I can read through that at the end and get a sense for the sentiment. And, people know that Tim and I have access to that and can read it, but they're still really honest in their discussion because they're not right there saying it right to us. And so it's helpful. And people really are able to get things down on paper that can make a positive difference in the next sprint. And in addition to reading that context, Tim and I also came up with this concept where we will sync with whoever ran the retro, if it was somebody from the team or the tech lead of that project, to get a sense for how the team was feeling and be able to help kind of bridge that gap so that we can help any way that we can as we try and iterate the process.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, a couple other tips worth mentioning. We try to, I know, John, you've done this very well, and I'm trying to do the same, where we'll anticipate team needs before they need to ask. So if somebody's going to need access for a platform or a resource or a calendar, anticipate that and do your best to grant them access before they need to ask for it. It's a little thing. It doesn't take a lot of time to ask for access to a platform in Slack, for example, but if you can sort of beat them to the punch, it helps reassure them that you're for them, you support them, you want them to succeed, and from that comes trust. We've talked about time off, being able to encourage one another to take advantage of that time off. Plan for it, step away, get refreshed, relax. It's necessary. We we've also talked about celebrating, and we at Headway, we do Friday team-wide celebration lunches. We make sure we recognize when somebody hits an annual anniversary with the company, when the birthday is happening. Again, we want to take a minute to simply say, hey, happy birthday, hope you have a fantastic day, congratulations on another year with Headway and all that you've achieved this past year. And then each Friday, like I said, we'll do a lunch and we'll pause and spend time together discussing personal, discussing professional, celebrating company achievements. There's lots that happens in the context of each of those conversations, which again builds trust.
Yeah, and then from a practical tip, more in the code for developers who do pull requests as a part of their normal process, which we typically do, it's really great to do those asynchronously so that the code is able to be reviewed, not just for style, right? You can use linters and things like that, but for the knowledge and understanding of best practices within that code base generally, and then also security and just modularity, testability, all those kinds of things. And it's a great way for a developer who submits the pull request to level up as they get feedback from one of their peers. And we found that it can be even more helpful, again, depending on disk and how people best receive feedback, to do those as a pairing session in person rather than just asynchronously in comments through GitHub. So that's one tip that's really been good for us. In addition to the celebration of anniversaries and birthdays, Tim, we also try and celebrate those project milestones more frequently than just the launch, because there's a lot of steps in between. And so that's something we can also give a shout out during lunches on Fridays.
Yeah, good call. Yeah, we take time also with all hands. John, would you want to describe what kind of rhythm we take with our all hands meetings and how that too contributes to trust throughout the team?
Yeah, definitely. We've ramped these up quite a bit over the 6 years of Headway's existence, and the even term all hands was something I wasn't super familiar with before starting Headway and working with a Silicon Valley startup called Handshake. So they were one of our first clients, and Garrett was their CEO, and he was calling an all hands meeting, and just like, I've never heard it called that before, but all right, that's cool. So we adopted it. I'm sure they aren't the first to use that phrase, but it was the first time I'd heard it. So it's just kind of a cool way to get everybody on the team together and understand where the company's headed. And we do this in a couple of different cadences. Initially, it was just annually. We would talk a little bit about our new goals for the year, and it was somewhat informal. It was through the process of EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system, which is how we operate the greater business at Headway generally. And then we progressed as we got better at EOS into being able to set quarterly goals. And so we would talk about those every quarter in addition to our annual. And then we really felt like we needed, especially over the last 18 months, to connect more with the team and understand if we're all heading in the right direction together as we navigate different issues with clients, with technology, with hiring, with COVID, with everything. And so we went to a monthly all hands as well. And in addition, this year, we rolled out company-wide profit sharing. And so we report our revenue updates to the entirety of the company monthly. We understand if we're tracking in the right direction, and we help empower people on the team to make good decisions around how to be profitable so that our client projects get done on time, and so that Headway as a business can be successful and invest in things like team weeks and new equipment and all the things that help us be excited to work at Headway, 100% healthcare, the Friday lunches, all these things. It's important to be able to be profitable and watch your revenue so that we can share in that success together. And so that's why we report that monthly, in addition to just project status updates and wins and celebrations. And then again, the quarterly cadence rolls up. Did we hit our revenue target for the quarter? And that's when we would be able to distribute some of the profit sharing. We do that quarterly on sort of a graduated scale. And then annually, did we achieve our goals? And so we kind of went through a reverse process there of frequency so that we could touch base with the team a little bit more frequently.
Yeah, and just a couple more ways that we engage with the team. We have semi-annual company-wide retreats, and so that's been challenging with COVID the last 18 months, but we've tried to still maintain a twice annual retreat cadence. And what we've seen when we have been able to get together face to face is we've invested in things like DISC and in MCore, Strengths Finders, Unique Ability, Dare to Lead, which John has already mentioned. We've spent time as a team going through those exercises in an attempt to better understand ourselves and one another. Being able to do that face to face, off-site, is very effective. It's been the most productive way to have those conversations, given the other options that we've tried or been forced into given things like pandemic. So those company-wide retreats provide us with opportunity to, again, work through those topics and those exercises, but then also just having time together, creating memories together, hiking, playing games, going go-karting, enjoying meals together, competing on anything and everything. Those are memories that we all treasure and have helped us sort of understand one another, have trust that is built up, and then be able to reflect on them here and there, simply to have a laugh together and enjoy those memories is a very effective way to spend time together.
Yeah, and that's great from a whole company-wide perspective, and you can lean into that also for your team. And so around conferences, a lot of times teams at Headway will go to a destination. So the design team all went out to Seattle for a design conference, and the dev team, we went, several of us, the folks who were focused on Elixir at least, went to ElixirConf a couple years ago in Denver, and we were able to sort of get together around a more specific topic and make some cool progress and build some trust with one another in those more unique settings as well. So I think that recaps our building a culture of trust and shared growth. A lot of different tips and tricks in there, ideas, things that can help you grow. And you can see that it takes a lot of intentionality to have culture be sustained over time. You know, it's just like any habit, any healthy habit that you want to do to improve your life. It takes consistent effort and small progress each and every day. So the next section, Tim, is demonstrating humility in leadership, specifically servant leadership. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, yep, I'd love to. So Headway has really been founded on the idea that we're going to work together humbly. We're going to lead when given the opportunity, with a servant's heart, right? And so by that we mean we're not going to delegate and then wash our hands of something. Practically speaking, we're going to work to delegate, empower one another, and then be there to support, to provide your expertise and your strengths, so that not only are you finding satisfaction, finding your day at work rewarding, but your teammate is equally, if not more so, being finding themselves satisfied with what they're contributing and with their team. Servant leadership it's necessary. We wouldn't exist if we weren't approaching our work with a servant's attitude. Reminds us to be humble. It reminds us that we're continually learning. Reminds us that products aren't just built in a day or a week or a month. It takes time, and even at the end of that time, that's just part of the life cycle of a much bigger picture. And so, being able to approach that work with a level of humility it's crucial. You have to do that, or likely the whole process, your whole process will start to crumble a bit.
Yeah, that's great. Appreciate that, Tim. It's one of the things that we try and do very intentionally at Headway, and that can be with leadership defined by title or with leadership organically throughout the team, right? Servant leadership isn't reserved just for those who have a specific title. So yeah, it's one of those things where if we're in a sticky spot with a project and we need to get it over the line, Tim and I are going to be there trying to help in whatever way we can, whether that's sometimes just moral support. Perhaps we're in a corner of technology neither Tim or I are experts in, and the team really is in the best spot to get it over the line. What can we do? Can we help document something? Can we review a pull request? Can we, pull somebody else in from a separate team who does have some additional experience to get some additional eyes on it for you, and just be there to fight with one another for what's best for everybody. And I think that servant leadership and building of culture and trust and growth, all of this leads into sort of the superpower of a team, and that's when there's 100% honest openness and honesty with one another. And so the next section to talk about is how to get actual feedback from your team, including the last 10% of the truth. And the last 10% of the truth is something that Tom, our EOS implementer, kind of harps on us about and reminds us of literally every time we have a quarterly review or an annual review as a leadership team with him. He said, I just ask that everybody's open and honest and we get to the last 10% of the truth. Like, that's literally what he says every time he kicks off a meeting. And that reminds us to be in the headspace of, we're not going to get there if we're not open and we're not talking about the actual problems, the root causes, the things that are unspoken typically because we're trying to be nice. And you can still be kind in the way that you deliver that feedback, but you don't have to play nice, right? Rumble with vulnerability, have trusting conversations that you belong in the room, as does this other person, and you're both there because you're supposed to be there, and you're going to come out with the best solution that's possible. And the thing is, in a meeting like that, you can disagree. You can even disagree loudly or with passion. But when the team makes a decision, we all agree that that is the decision we're going to go forward with, unless we're presented with additional data that everybody needs to revisit. But if we all agree that, yes, this is the best path forward, we're not going to back channel about it after the fact or say, oh, well, I wouldn't have done it that way or whatnot. And so people really see the leadership at Headway as a unified team that believes in what we're doing and helps row in the right direction. And so that's something that can really, impact all of the different teams so that you're leading by example, and then they do that as well. And it's really great to see. And there's a few different things that we do to try and help instill this in our teams. And the first thing is just setting aside dedicated time for everybody in the entirety of the company. And so Tim does several weekly one-on-ones. I do several weekly one-on-ones with the dev team. We split the team up into two right now, as we both sit in that dev lead seat. And we just give everybody 20 to 30 minutes to talk about their week. Hey, what'd you do over the weekend? How are you feeling about the project this week? What's on your mind? How are you progressing in your quarterly goals? And give them the space to be heard first before we coach, and let them bring anything that they need to us, so that they feel like they've got a space to be heard for sure. Even if they don't feel heard in their project throughout the week, there's that sort of safe space where they can understand that we care for them, and perhaps we're aware of a situation that needs to improve, and we'll help with that each week as we go. What are some of the other tools, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, John. That was good. With one-on-ones, just like you said, having a safe space for a teammate to be able to share and express their feelings and their thoughts. Sometimes that can become routine. Like it takes intentionality, it takes diligence. Lead honestly is a tool that we've used to help, I guess, guard against and combat that routine that can otherwise set in, that is monotonous, right? Like there's a danger there that can make one-on-ones less and less effective over time. Lead honestly helps facilitate by sending questions a couple days prior to one-on-one to somebody that's reporting to you, and ask them questions about a particular topic, right? And they're a little bit, they try to be a little bit different each week, come from a different angle. They're interested in your well-being. They're interested in your project work, your satisfaction with the company. Tries to look at you holistically, and then from that you can answer those questions. Lead honestly will then send a copy of their answers to your report, and that gives you something to dig into as part of your one-on-one, again, in an effort to combat any monotony that can set in.
Yeah, there's different playbooks inside of Lead Honestly that can help you gear those questions towards where somebody is in their growth path. So if they're working on being a better leader, because maybe they're a tech lead for the first time on this project, you can put them in the workbook or playbook, I guess it's called leadership, right? And if it's they're brand new to the company, there's an onboarding one where we can say, hey, what worked well with past managers? You know, how do you like to receive praise and feedback? And just asks a lot of those different questions. And again, if to clarify, they're sent over email or Slack, and so you're in a different headspace than when you're in a video one-on-one. And so we like to give people both of those opportunities to bubble up feedback to us. And sometimes if it's sort of like Tim said, I don't want to use this word, but like a boring one-on-one, like, hey, there's just not much to talk about this week. That's when I'll dig into the Lead Honestly questions, because you almost can't not answer those. They're provocative, not from like a out there crazy standpoint, but just like they provoke you to respond and think and reflect. And so it's really good, fodder for those harder discussions that might be difficult to initiate. If you're just on video, you can say, well, hey, this question you answered this way, I'd love to talk more about that. And so sometimes the Lead Honestly can be a little bit more routine, and we'll get more to the relationship building aspect of a one-on-one, and just that kind of camaraderie and just being there for one another and having that consistent time each week. And I personally would like to get better at not rescheduling my one-on-ones, and it's, I think, really important for folks to feel like that's your priority, is that time that we've agreed to meet. And so that's something I definitely want to get better at, and then would encourage other managers who have one-on-ones to try and hold that consistent time, because I've been in those positions where it gets bumped and you skip it that week and whatever, and it just doesn't feel good. And I know it doesn't. So it always hurts me when I have to do that. Sometimes on a small team, when you have to jump into different things or a meeting runs long, people give you grace and understand, but definitely can make a big difference. Feeling like that's a protected time.
Right. Yeah, I think one other thing that we've instituted, which has been effective, is we want to understand the health of a given project. And so at the end of the week, we send out through Slack, we initiate through Slack a reminder to complete a project health scorecard. And so we ask a series of questions, just help us understand how you're feeling about the project. Are there any concerns you have about the project itself? Are there any concerns you have personally? Is there something about the project that is making you uneasy, or is just not what you expected? Like, are there things that you need support on that you're not getting? Well, that project health scorecard is given us some insight into the health of the project, and allowed us to react accordingly, so that a team doesn't ever feel like they're cornered, that something has gone wrong and it's up to them to fix it. Hopefully we can help identify that sooner than later and then be part of the solution.
Yeah, and much like Lead Honestly is a great asynchronous text-based complement to a in-person one-on-one, the Project Health Scorecard is a really great end of week complement to a bi-weekly retro. And so the retro, again, is like on video, where it's getting sort of transcribed, so to speak, as people type into Notion. But that only happens every 2 weeks. And so to shorten the feedback cycle, every week on Friday, as you submit your timesheet at Headway, we ask you to please fill out the Project Health questionnaire. So that way, if midweek we need to pivot for a backlog groom, and because something got funky, gives us that opportunity to intervene and keep the sprint on track potentially. And that Project Health checkup is in Typeform, as Tim mentioned, and we created a duplicate of the one that we use, and took out our developers' names and our client names and left those generic. So we can share that with you here in the chat and with the show notes to follow up. And if it's helpful to you, definitely use it as is. Feel free to augment it if need be. I'm not sure off the top of my head if you can duplicate the Typeform in the way that we've shared it, but certainly you could take it and just kind of steal the questions if there isn't a way to copy it directly. I guess just to address the other question that came in about performance reviews and evaluation, we take all of the information that we gather throughout the weekly one-on-ones, the Project Health check-in, the Lead Honestly feedback, retro notes and celebrations from your team, there's a great section in our retros called appreciations that is towards the end. But even if we're going to go a few minutes over, I always encourage the team to do it, because oftentimes in a retro, it's a lot about what we can improve, and we want to make sure that we also talk about what went really well. And we do that to start. Hey, let's spend 10 minutes talking about what went well as a team, and then maybe like 40, 45 minutes about what we can improve, and try and save the last 5 to 10 minutes for individual sort of appreciations and call outs. And so I think it's really helpful to be able to have that context to add into how people are doing, both as they're approaching their quarterly goals, executing on their client projects, and working well with their team members. And so we take all that data and we ask people to think about what they've done in the last quarter as we do their quarterly reviews. And they actually initiate it from a tool called Progression. So I believe it's progression.app. And you go into Progression, and we've defined a whole rubric of what it means to be an effective contributor at Headway, from a junior level position to a mid-level developer to a senior developer, to a tech lead, which is a designation on any given project, not necessarily a title. And then dev lead, the seat that Tim and I sit in, and then CTO, the seat that I also sit in. So those 6 or 7 positions are available, and we can see across all of the different aspects of our culture what you need to do in order to be successful and to progress in your career from one stage to the next. And it covers across the whole of the company all of our core values. And beyond core values, it covers more specific things to the design team, to the development team, to product strategy, to marketing, and everything in between. And we talk about this role needs to be able to do 80% of this thing or better to progress to the next role. And we have the person go through and say, am I not yet meeting? Am I meeting, or am I exceeding this skill across our core values, across the tech pieces of the puzzle, and across communication? And once they initiate the review with their thoughts, it comes to me and Tim, and then we go through it blindly and say what we think the person is not meeting, or exceeding, and we can give notes for each of the things. And then the first time we see that is when we get on a call with them together to go through their review, and we discuss and talk about, hey, you said you're not meeting this aspect of our one of our core values, and I think you are meeting it. Here's the ways that I saw you demonstrate it in this last quarter, and I think that was really great. Don't you remember how well you did in that instance? And sometimes people just forget. They're like, oh yeah, because recently I slipped up and I didn't. But you're right, I do have that in me, and they can strive towards that. Or conversely, if I miss something that somebody did, they can advocate for themselves, and we welcome that and give that opportunity through this tool for them to say, actually, I'm exceeding this, and here's the ways that I do it. And they feel empowered to share that information with you in a way that doesn't feel like they're bragging or whatnot. So it gives us really solid foundations upon which to base promotions and even hiring and unfortunately terminations as well. Like, hey, you're just not meeting the level that we need you to, and we have to bump you down a level, or maybe it's just not a good fit. And so we have a system that really makes it clear, right? Clear as kind, as to whether or not somebody is meeting the bar, and that's another term from EOS. Whether you're meeting the bar. So that's how we deal with that. And if somebody isn't meeting the bar, we typically will try and help and do everything we can in order to get them to that good spot, right? We hire at Headway for the long term, for a career, not, hey, we need a subcontractor to work on this one particular engagement, and then we might, do a layoff at the end of the project. We want to grow the team at Headway intentionally, and that's why we invest in all of these things and try and really help people do their best work of their career at Headway. Even though we know most people aren't going to retire at Headway, we feel like it's still worth investing for the time that we're going to be together in having the best team that's possible. And if we've helped somebody get to a spot in their career where they can go on and do great things at the next company, and we had some little part in their growth story or the potential growth of the whole ecosystem of technology and inclusion and diversity and kindness and working together towards a shared vision, then that's all the better, even if the people end up leaving after a couple of years.
Yeah, I think that was great, John. I think that's a good recap of what we use to collect feedback, and it's been an effort to identify those tools and then establish a routine of using them, but it's been worth it. And we're always honing our process, but this has been effective so far for us.
Yeah, and if folks have other tools like, hey, we tried Lead Honestly and this one works for us better, let us know. We're always working on improving our process, like Tim said, or if some of these things you're hearing about for the first time and you have success or have shortcomings implementing them and want some help or just to chat about it, hit us up in the comments and let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you through that, or if you've got some tips for us. Love to continue the conversation. So I guess to wrap up, we hope that this talk has helped you, learn how to confidently grow your team with new hires, upskilling your existing team to be happy and performing and be able to grow consistently with senior, junior, and mid-level talent. Again, we talked about identifying those folks that are on that upward trajectory and empowering and delegating to them as soon as you possibly can. Kicking off projects to help teams integrate everyone's unique styles with tools like DISC, and making sure that you establish those success criteria for the end of the project at the beginning of the project so we all know where we're going. We talked a lot about getting meaningful feedback from your team and getting to that last 10% of the truth, which is only possible if everybody's open and honest and you've built that culture of trust. So you can't just say, hey, tell me the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. You have to work on that process over time so people feel comfortable with it. And I already touched on being able to define the success criteria to get buy-in from the team so that we're all rowing in the same direction. So we hope that these tips help you in your journey to build a great development team. We certainly feel like we've built a great one here at Headway. So if you're interested in joining us and want to become part of the development team at Headway, we've got openings for iOS developers in Swift UI, Kotlin developers, React Native, Ruby on Rails, Elixir, React, whatever's coming next, we're going to be exploring it. I mean, it's on our EOS journey to continue to explore and integrate new technologies, AR, VR, ML, AI, all the things, right? We need to be able to have folks that are excited about exploring those aspects of technology. And in terms of growth trajectory at Headway, if you are excited to join and perhaps you're more of a senior developer and you're like, well, is there room for me to grow at Headway? You could grow into a manager like a lot of places have as an option. That's what Tim and I did. And so we're still technical, but we're more on the people side of things and on the client side of things for me these days. But we also know that not everybody wants to grow in a development team just into management. And so recently at Headway, we've been carving out new positions that still have yet to have a 100% solid name on them, but tech champion is one that's been thrown out a couple of times where, hey, you're going to be our mobile tech champion. You're going to be our web front end tech champion and our back end tech champion. And we're trying to figure out over time if we'll have one for each specific core technology or if they'll be sort of more general, like I just mentioned. But those are exciting ways that you can continue to progress in your career at Headway. And I would encourage other companies who are looking to grow great development teams to find paths for people to advance that isn't just management. So if any of that sounds good to you and you'd want to be a part of a exciting team of consultants here at Headway, please reach out and get in touch. We have open positions right now. So I think that's it. Jacob, anything to close us out?
No, this is all amazing. This is all very in-depth for each section, which I think a lot of people appreciate. There's a lot of nuance to this kind of stuff, as you shared, like, situations can be different. But again, I shared a lot of the tools and processes that we use in the links in the chat there the best I could. EOS, we have that blog post on better retros, also the podcast episode about that as well, deep dive into it. DISC, MCore, Strengths Finders, Lead Honestly, the Dev Project Health Checkup, examples, progression tool, and then job opportunities at Headway, career growth stuff. So it's all there in the chat. And again, we won't be having a development event next month because we have our team week next month. So I'll be out of the office for one of the weeks in September, but we'll be back again in October with another development event as well. But yeah, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't yet to get more content like this. And be sure to check out all our past recordings. You can go to our website, headway.io, and go to the events page and see all the past events. Or if you're on YouTube right now, you can see on our channel all the videos on React and React testing. If you're a startup founder, if you're a designer, there's stuff for you as well. So that's all I have for now. Be sure to check out our podcast too. You can go to our podcast page on our website. Lots of resources basically everywhere from Headway. So we're doing our best to help other people reach their goals, kind of no matter where they're at within their startup or their team. So yeah, awesome. Anything else you want to share, John or Tim, before we close out?
No, appreciate it, Jacob. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jacob. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Yeah, thanks
everybody.
everyone. Yeah, have a great day.